great companies don't start by boiling the ocean. They start with a tight wedge that is so painful that customers almost pull the product out of the company's hands. And that is something that I keep looking for whenever I'm investing in a new company.
Arpit Mittal
is a world-class venture capitalist
investing in software and AI startups.
What are the things that turn you off from wanting to speak to somebody?
I think the biggest red flag I see is...
Welcome back to Decoded. My name's Alfie Whattam, and this is the show where I speak to experts about what it takes to build great teams and companies. Make sure that you click the follow or subscribe button for more great content like this, and I hope you enjoyed the episode. Amazing. So, Arpit, you've invested in so many exciting and successful companies. What's the most important thing that you look for when deciding to invest in a startup?
Yeah, thanks, Alfie. At the earliest stages, I'm looking for two things primarily. First is a founder and a team who is almost irrationally obsessed with solving a problem. And second, a non-obvious insight that could scale into something huge. I also fundamentally believe that great companies don't start by boiling the ocean. They start with a tight wedge that is so painful that customers almost pull the product out of the company's hands. And that is something that I kind of keep looking for whenever I'm meeting or investing in a new company.
How do you determine if a founder truly has that obsession? Because I imagine I have a small aspect into this world as an angel with a couple of investments, but when I see businesses, everybody tells me they're obsessed. Everybody tells me they're going to work 100 hours a week. And when you have a deck and 2 1-hour-long meetings, it's pretty hard to determine if somebody really is going to walk that talk. So how do you actually determine if they are obsessed versus they're just faking it?
I think it goes back to the quality of the conversations that you have with the founders. In many cases, I've felt that what used to be like a 30-minute or a 45-minute intro conversation with the founder, when it stretches beyond like an hour or a couple of hours, just because both the founder and us, we're having so much enjoyment talking about what they're building. And I think that over a period of time, like you have one conversation, you have number of such conversations, you start to assess some of those things where the team demonstrates some specific characteristics of why they're the best team and why they're the perfect fit to solve the problem. You know, it can also be when like founders that have a personal connection to the problem. Like one of the healthcare founders that I've worked with grew up in a family of clinicians, including people who worked in behavioral health clinics. They'd firsthand seen the problem and how broken the workflows are before jumping into starting something and solve it from like solving for billing errors, data entry issues, clinicians spending hours and hours on documentation instead of patients. So that kind of lived experience, when they translate all of that into a product that can be offered not just to one customers, but a number of customers in a scalable manner, that tells me that they are probably thinking beyond what the obvious looks like and jumping in with all the effort and all the intensity.
Why is that wedge that you mentioned so important to you? Like a lot of people that come along and they try and do everything on day one, and usually that's a recipe for failure. Like the best companies, like look at Facebook. It started as an app to connect people at Harvard University. Like it's about as niche as it gets, and now look at them. So why is it important for you to start on a particular small, not a small TAM, but a smaller area of the market, and then expand outwards? Why is that so key in your eyes?
I think it is important to solve something that the customers are deeply requiring a need for, right? And it often happens that the surface area of that solution is small to start with because they're trying to solve something that is most relevant or most pressing today versus pressing tomorrow. For example, I invested in a company called FreshPain, which is essentially building a privacy-first healthcare marketing platform. And the reason why that is important is most of the healthcare companies, they don't know what kind of information are they collecting online when a user visits their website or any portal. What FreshPain does is it in a very compliant manner, aggregates all the information and sends only the relevant information downstream so that all the customers are staying compliant and are not violating any issues or any privacy laws. So the thing that is most important for that specific use case is that the customers are managing hundreds of millions of marketing budgets, and pretty much some of that becomes deeply affected if they can't market online, right?
Mm,
So they need a solution to continue to market online and on various portals while staying compliant. So the initial wedge is probably just helping them figure out what data points to collect and what data points not to collect. I think eventually they will probably want to a solution which is more deeper into providing analytics, providing retargeting and things like that. But the start of the problem is something which is so pressing for them where they can't afford to lose those customers and they can't afford to not spend those marketing dollars on the portal to acquire those customers. So I often feel that this is not something unique to one company like this one, but it often seems to be the case across the variety of companies where the starting problems is small and which is one of the reasons why it gets such a strong product market pull from the customers.
mm. You mentioned around market pull a few times then. Would you rather back a founder where you're not that excited about the space,
Yeah.
but that space is exploding and the market is really, really demanding it? Or would you rather back a founder where you're really, really passionate about the space and you believe in them, but you just don't, the market isn't, it's not an exciting thing. They're building some more legacy solution. You know, what's more important to you? I guess the idea and where it sits in the market at the moment and the pull that it's receiving, or the other side of the coin.
I think it's definitely a combination of both. I think I would if I were to just think about like the weight that I put on either of those two, whether it is the idea, the market, or the founder, I would always lean more towards the founder and the insights that they have when they're starting something net new versus looking at the perfectness of the solution or the perfectness of the idea that they're going after. Because I feel that most successful founders, they often pivot a few times before landing on something that is truly magical, that is working really well, and that is something that customers will absolutely love. So I would say this has also been a learning, I think, over the last few years of my career as a venture investor, where initially you end up getting too caught up in like, this is the best idea. I think this is very fascinating. Whereas you tend to kind of provide a little bit less weightage to the founders and what they understand. But then you have to realize that the founders and the team are the ones that are on the field building and on the field that are seeing things. So my understanding of what the space might look like will not probably hold too much weight if the founders feel it otherwise and they see the market kind of evolving on almost on a daily basis. So I would say both those things are important, but I would strongly weigh the founder characteristics, their personal insights into why they decide to do something and start something in a particular space versus going with an idea first approach.
Yeah, look, I'm so with you. And oftentimes it does take a while to iterate and to pivot to really find the type of business and the type of market that the founders are almost built for. Everyone talks about product market fit, but founder market fit in many ways is just as, or if not more important. How do you evaluate that? Because you've mentioned around the healthcare example then, and if they've got that previous industry domain knowledge, then that's amazing. They get that space, they have a network, brilliant. But if they don't, maybe, and they're trying to build something in a market they've never really quite operated in before,
Yeah.
how do you evaluate founder market fit?
That's a great question. I feel that it has to be a combination of a few things. One is, of course, the lived experience and the earned secret that I talked about, where the founders have a personal connection and they feel that there is something unique to their own experience that they are bringing to the table and are excited about. The second, I feel, is a deep curiosity and a technical clarity. Like, this is probably where I feel that even the founders or the teams that have not operated in a space that they're going after is so important. Um, the discussions that you have with founders, I mean, the discussions will almost feel like the founders light up when you ask them about why about a product decision versus just a how or a what, right? So I think it's less about um, what is the end goal or the end solution is going to look like, but more about why are you doing certain decisions and doing certain things a certain way, which can come from talking to a number of customers, talking to an actual user set before actually starting a product, right? So I think maybe it's the engineer in me that wants to feel like that the founders and the teams have thought through a few steps ahead before they're jumping onto something net new. But if you have not had an experience building something in the space relevant to your experience, but you've done done the hard work of talking to potential customers, whether through interviews, whether through personal chats, to really understand the pain points and understand what is it that is most important for them. I think that is very, very critical to me. And the third, I would say, is ability to magnetize and attract high quality talent.
Mm.
Even if, again, going back to my earlier point, even though you may not be the most um, deeply experienced in the industry that you're going after, but the fact that you can convince other people who are often, in many cases, way smarter than the founders themselves to join them early, I think that's another sign which I would probably put that in the founder market fit bucket itself, where it's not super important whether you come from the industry, but the fact that can you create a compelling story where you've done the groundwork, you've done the research, and you can essentially relate in a very convincing manner to the early employees, to the early investors, that this is the reason why they should be working with you versus not. So I think it's a combination of a few things. And in everything I say, I mean, these are certain things that I try to follow, but you also know that ventures is a game of outliers, right? Most often, the most successful companies are the companies that don't follow any of these buckets or any of these rules or patterns, right? So in some way, our job as investors is to be a pattern matching at the core, is to have pattern matching skills at the core. But at the same time, we have to be nimble enough where we realize if this does not fit into a certain bucket, but there is some form of exceptionalism, then we would go ahead and invest in those companies.
Certainly. This is a quick message to tell you about my company, Alpha AI. We built Lisa, the world's first AI-powered recruiter who screens candidates for you on autopilot. You can make your recruitment process 10 times faster, 90% lower cost, and significantly improve the candidate experience, all with our AI agent for hiring. Learn more at welovealpha.com or click the link below in the description. And now, back to the episode. All of those points that you mentioned there are incredible green flags to look out for when trying to invest in a founder. What about the flip side? What are some red flags that you consistently see, whether that's in the pitch deck, whether that's when you're having that conversation with them? Of course, it would be the opposites of what you've talked about, but just at a higher level, what are the sort of the things that make you say no and turn you off from wanting to speak to somebody?
I think the biggest red flag I see is when a deck or a conversation feels like it is designed to impress investors instead of showing deep customer obsession and deep customer love. If, for example, if on a pitch deck, if every slide screams like AI powered, but really cannot explain which specific workflow is being transformed and why do we need an AI first solution versus not, I think that is an obvious issue when it comes to telling a story only to impress investors. The second I often feel is that founders tend to get sometimes uh, too caught up with like some sort of vanity matrix. Like, for example, in open source world, how many GitHub stars do you have and what's the growth of those GitHub stars and whatnot. I would rather want to talk to 10 high quality customers who cannot live without your product versus talking or like coming across 1,000 customers who onboarded the product, but then quickly churned after a few months, right? So I think focusing on the right things and not trying to make it feel like this is a pitch meeting or have to say certain things and behave in certain way for the investors to get excited. If the investor on the other side, if they have done their job well and if they know what they're talking about and they're doing, they would really not care for those like shiny things, if you will, as long as there is a compelling story with the founder and the space that they're going after.
Arpit, you mentioned AI a few times then, and I know that you're super focused on AI. How do you think artificial intelligence will change the world over the next, let's say, 5 years?
Yeah, no, absolutely. as a fund, we've spent a lot of time looking at AI businesses across the stack, whether it is at the infrastructure middleware or at the application layer. I feel that we are almost at the tail end of the first innings of infrastructure and almost at the beginning of the application era. I feel that we're almost moving from the foundation models and the vector databases to AI that is quietly woven into how we work. And I see three big shifts coming, if you will. First, I feel is that every app will get a co-pilot,
Mm.
not just a chatbot that is bolted on, but a real digital teammate that is embedded into the workflows, whether it is your CRM, whether it is your analytics solution, whether it is your dashboard. It'll feel like working with a colleague rather than using a software. I feel that I'm using the OpenAI ChatGPT or the Anthropic Claude almost like several times in a day versus using Google that I used to do pretty often. So I think it almost feels like having like a colleague or a pair programmer. I was basically spinning up some websites or like some simple workflow automation for my own workflow as an investor, where there are certain areas where I track the new investments. There are certain areas where I record conversations. There are certain areas where I go back to those conversations and record things. And I quickly was able to spin up some things that almost felt like that I'm having a peer that I'm working with versus actually using a software. So I think that is the first part. The second is it almost feels like there will be like a do it for me interfaces. What that means is that instead of having 20, 30 clicks that you have to go through a dashboard, you will just ask, like, show me the top churn drivers for enterprise accounts last quarter, and it'll just pop that up for you, right? We're already seeing that happen with some of our portfolio companies. Like Cloud Zero is one of my earliest investments, which help companies manage and optimize their cloud cost spend across various infrastructure footprints. And the feature that they've recently rolled out to their customers is basically asking in natural language what has been the biggest cost drivers in terms of their engineering code base change that will increase their cloud spend. And that answer, which would take a few clicks and a few dashboards, is now available at the tip of a button. So I would say it's mostly going to be like a do it for me interfaces. That's going to be the point number two. I think the third thing in some way is the verticalized AI, where the real breakthroughs will come from domain specific models where accuracy and compliance matter a lot, whether it is healthcare, whether it is legal, whether it is finance. That's where I feel that AI will move from nice to have to a mission critical software. The
Mm.
companies I think I get most excited about are the ones that are either rethinking the entire workflows in these industries, not just slapping a chatbot on top of it. That's where the deepest impact in my mind will come from.
I'm so with you, and it echoes what we're building at our company as well, right? Like it's in my world, like we built an AI recruiter essentially, which has a prompt box. You tell it what you're looking to hire, the agent
Right.
goes off, completes multiple tasks, finds people, interviews them, scores them, delivers back the results, and it does those multiple stages in a done for you approach, without you needing to click on 50 different buttons and do 50 different things, and building on the application layer on top of all the latest large language models. And as they get better and better and better, so does the product, exponentially on autopilot. So I'm so with you when it comes to that. I guess my view when it comes to this sort of thing is traditional software as a service, because of agents, will start to become almost service as a software to a degree.
Right.
And the budget within potential customers is no longer just limited to software. It will be limited to the labor budget and the
Right.
employees. And I'm not saying that agents will replace all jobs, but let's be honest, a good percentage of them will start to become automated at 90% lower cost and at 10 times speed. And that's already what we're starting to see with a lot of our clients, for example. Do you share my sentiment that I guess SaaS will flip on its head and reverse over the next couple of years because of agentic workflows?
I would agree. Yeah, I think even in our existing companies and the new companies that we're investing in, it is pretty clear that the budgets are not just limited to software, but those where you can almost show an improvement in the labor budgets or improvement in the cost of hiring somebody net new versus cost of hiring an agent. I'll give you an example. your recruiting use case, I think, is a perfect one. There were a couple of companies of the sector that I was looking at where the end customer is a staffing agency and they were looking to bring on X number of new recruiters to support the demand that they were seeing. But as we're seeing more and more voice first recruiting agents, they started deploying those solutions internally. And at the end of 6 months, they only hired two more recruiters versus hiring five. And that's just a direct impact towards the bottom line for the three new recruiters that they will not hire in favor of an AI agent. That is the first part, which is more tangible, which is more easily understandable in terms of what the end output is going to look like. The more interesting part is these AI agents will never tire. They will never have an opinion which is against what your organization feels like. They can constantly run in the background for tirelessly for hours and hours, and they can continue the same level of enthusiasm and excitement when they're talking to a potential candidate versus a human on the other side, right? So there is both a quantitative aspect to it, which is the budgets on the labor that we talked about, but there's also an enormous qualitative aspect to it, where the user experience will significantly change in favor of higher NPS scores and uh, customers who are adopting AI solutions versus customers who are not adopting AI solutions.
That's the most exciting part about it to me, because it's not just about saving money or doing things faster. It's about making it better. And if you can have something working 24/7, in our case, the agent has a full avatar. You can barely detect that their software. They speak 30 different languages. It's kind of mind blowing when you think about it. And we're going to start to see that in my eyes, in that we'll have an AI accountant and an AI. We're already seeing an AI, developer with Lovable and Replit, and then an AI,
Yeah.
video editor and graphic designer. And I personally use 20 different agents that I pay for, which I used to hire people and have a team of people for many of these tasks. And now
Right.
we still have somebody checking it and running it, but they're able to work 10 times better. Right now it's a co-pilot. Soon it will become a replacement, which does open up a very interesting question, because
And
the,
then if you think about it, right? I mean, we talked about some of these use cases which are somewhat mission critical. It's like high urgency and high accountability in certain way. There is also a very large variety of or a large market of use cases which may not feel like it's the most exciting or the most sexy, if you will, but they are very urgent and it requires a lot of time and effort. For example, if I have to call my Wi-Fi vendor and ask them to change my plans from X to Y because I'm going to be away from my home address for 15 days. It takes forever. It takes at least five different calls. It requires me logging into multiple different accounts, changing passwords because who the hell knows what the password I used for the email account that I use for my Wi-Fi password. But now, if I can offload that heavy task to an agent and tell the agent that these are the five things that are important to me and this is what I need you to do. And if there is any ambiguity, let me know and I will jump in and answer those questions for you. I think it is that nature of work that we will experience going forward, where on a scale of say 100 units of work, I can offload 20, 30, 40 units of work to an agent while still doing the last mile or the first mile units of work, which are the most critical parts of it, which is where my input is required as a human being, whereas everything else in between can be completely automated, right? It saves me time, it gives me a lot of efficiency, and at the end it's a much higher user experience for me. So I think it's a whole variety of use cases that we've probably not even experienced before that we'll see open up with an agent first world.
Absolutely. Everyone is becoming a super manager, and the people that are adopting this stuff right now and getting in early are going to become superheroes in a couple of years from now. They're going to be running circles around everybody else that just starts to get involved and to catch up. And that's a perfect example that you said there, because there are so many boring markets and tiny little wedges, which typically software just left alone because it almost didn't seem like the TAM was big enough or worth getting involved in. But now, for the first time ever in history, if this works, and it is, all the directions are pointing to the fact that it is going to continue this way, then there'll be multi-billion dollar businesses created in areas that we won't even think to imagine. Just the other day, I got pitched on an agent which was rescheduling supply chain deliveries for truck drivers. And like, I mean, you might have been able to build some kind of CRM in that space beforehand, but it never would have probably reached a unicorn status. But a task like that has thousands of people globally doing that job, and that is a job which is ripe for disruption over the next couple of years. This poses a very interesting question because the definition of AGI seems to be constantly getting pushed forward. Like originally it was the Turing test, and I think we've blown past that. So like, do we have AGI now? Well, most people would say no. I mean, we're constantly pushing that bar higher, and I think right now the common consensus is that when we have agents that are kind of doing the vast majority of tasks, then it's maybe AGI. I'm sure when we reach that point, we'll push it forward again. But
yeah.
Do you believe in 10 years from now, we will have a universally agreed upon definition of AGI, which we have achieved?
I think it depends on how you define AGI. If it means a system that can do every cognitive task as well as a human being, we'll get close to it in a narrow domain, but true general reasoning, self-direction, or self-alignment are still, I think, a much higher bar that we have to solve for. I think what excites me as an investor isn't the goalpost of AGI itself, but it's all about the value that we are unlocking in the way that we are while we get to that point. We're already seeing AI outperform humans in specific fields, whether it is coding, diagnostics, legal research, just getting narrow co-pilots to be ready and be really, really good, I think will unleash a massive productivity gains. And I think I agree to your point where we're keeping the goalposts shifted with AGI, but I think it's a good problem to have. We're constantly innovating, we're constantly getting to the point where we feel that we're still not AGI ready. But if you ask me, like 2 years ago, whether 90% of my workflows will have some form of AI component attached to it, I think I would have probably said no. Like, do we call that we are in AGI right now? Some would probably say yes, right? I mean, Waymo, I think, just announced that they've done 100 million rides, like completely completely non-supervised, right? So that's a definition of AGI in a certain way, right? So I think I would rather focus on like the means rather than getting to the end state where the things that we're able to achieve and what we're able to unlock along the way excites me more. Hopefully we'll get to an AGI in not that distant future, but until then, I still remain very optimistic in everything that we're seeing right now.
The Waymo example is an excellent one, and it's obviously an incredible business. I didn't quite realize that many miles were unsupervised because I know that there had been a bit of questioning around how many of those were done by a human and taking over and having somebody in the loop. And obviously, it'll be very interesting to see what happens there now that Tesla have really fully entered the arena and starting to compete. If that works out, they can flick a switch, and then globally they have a huge competitor potentially. But I had an argument with somebody around LiDAR versus computer vision and just using cameras a while back, and my opinion is shifting back and forth between the two, and I probably don't know enough about it to really have an expert opinion, but it's a very interesting question. This has been amazing, Arpit. Thanks for sharing your ideas on everything from founders looking to raise, build a successful company, and the future of AI. If people have enjoyed this and they want to learn more, what's the best place to go? Would it be your LinkedIn, X, the fund's website? Where should they go to?
Yeah, all of it. I'm very accessible on LinkedIn, X, and on my email, which is available on the website on our team page. I'm waking up every day more excited than I am the previous day, just because of the things that we're seeing and how fast the pace of innovation is. If there are founders that are listening to this podcast who would love to just chat without necessarily needing to pitch, I just love talking to founders and people who are building at the center of all of it. Please feel free to reach out, and I'll be more than happy to have a conversation.
Awesome. I definitely got that vibe. So awesome. Cool.
Perfect.
Arpit, thank you very much. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure that you click the follow or subscribe button wherever you're watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Introducing Lisa, the world's first AI-powered recruiter. She's an AI agent who works 24/7, screening candidates on autopilot, conducting interviews in 30 different languages, uploading all the best candidates to your applicant tracking system. Hire 10 times faster at 90% lower cost and significantly improve the candidate experience. Visit welovealpha.com to start your free trial now.